Hey everyone, Plague Diaries, episode 19. I didn't think we'd be doing more than, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 of these, but we're almost into 20 now. That was X with White Girl off of Los Angeles, and it's just that kind of day. I drove down to Tom's River today to get a COVID-19 test. Generally I go every few weeks. I'm out and about in the world, wearing my mask, but there are times when I don't wear my mask when I'm, training and stuff like that. But I just want to stay safe. And yes, I realize that I'm taking a risk doing that, but I don't see anyone. I'm here by myself. And when I go see my family, I quarantine and I make sure that I get tested and all that jazz. So I'm being responsible, but I'm also trying to live a full of life as I possibly can until some kind of resolution is done, and be it vaccines or immune systems or whatever. Just got to keep trucking. Now, another interesting thing is last week I spent 8 hours masked up in a room with complete strangers taking an exam. And for those of you who know me personally, you know that for the better part of this year, I've been studying for the professional engineering exam for mechanical engineering in New York State. Had to get it rescheduled twice, and I finally took it on December 5th, Saturday, and I received a passing grade. And it's like a huge weight had been lifted off of my chest, and I feel pretty awesome. This is the first weekend that I've actually had time to myself to delve back into the things that I love, i.e. making music, reading, writing, watching fun movies, and just getting into weird, interesting stuff every weekend of this entire year. With a few exceptions, I've spent hitting the books, easily putting in about 15 hours, 16 hours a week studying, sometimes more than that. And it's a big accomplishment. It's something I should have did, maybe 16, 17 years ago. I should have did this, but I was busy trailblazing across the world, playing festivals, making records, touring, and running away from this career that I have. And, this past year, no tours. So I decided I'm home. I have time. I might as well get this thing done. It'll help me. And also I just love achieving. I like doing things that are hard and difficult. And this is probably one of the more difficult things I've tried to do in my life. And I was successful, and I'm pretty happy about that. So, yeah, the exam itself, 8 hours in a room in Manhattan in one of these testing centers. Yes, there was, social distancing. I wasn't on top of anybody. We all were wearing masks. But you know how it is. I felt a lot of anxiety because that's a long time, to be in a room with a bunch of people, breathing, exhaling, and so I got my exam today. The local area Project Baseline site in Edison is all booked up. I couldn't get anything. So the nearest place that I was able to get this test was all the way down in Tom's River, which is like, I don't know, maybe 50 miles from here in Ocean County. So, a nice little Sunday, man. It was a beautiful day out. It was warm. I drove down. It took about an hour listening to some good music. I was rocking some Evoking. This X record, Los Angeles, is the kind of cool Sunday driving on the highway kind of music as far as I'm concerned. So that's where that song plays an important part in the day. Took the test. They got their shit together a lot more down there in the Tom's River location. I was in and out, like it was a drive up. You're at the drive-through area. The guy hands you this vial. He hands you a Q-tip. Boom, boom, boom. Done. Up here in Edison, there's like this weird, contraption that looks like it's from, like Brazil or something, where they blow this thing through a chute and you take it out of this compartment. And I don't know. Too many steps. Too bad Ocean County is an hour away. I would go down there to do my my COVID testing. Right before Thanksgiving, I got one because I was going to see my family. And, about a week before, I went to one of these, because I couldn't get an appointment at Edison once again. I went out to one of these urgent care places. And, after I got the test, I just quarantined myself. I stayed home. I didn't see anybody. I didn't do anything. I just stayed in the apartment. That was an experience because the place opened at 8 o'clock in the morning. I went out on a weekend. I think it was a Saturday. So I got there at like 6:45, and there was like 8 people ahead of me waiting online. They had like lawn chairs, and I was like, man, this is like a heavy scene here. I thought I was going to be the first one in line, but, next time I got to do this, I'm going to get there at like 6, and I'm sure maybe there'll be someone there before me. But for this upcoming Christmas holiday, I'm probably going to get there super early, maybe the Sunday before, give myself about 5 or 6 days of quarantine time, and try to get there at 6 as early as I can and try to be in and out. Even if you're first in line, it still takes you like an hour to do the thing. And I find that to be really inefficient. But yeah, these people are, hey man, respect, man. Respect to all these health workers. They're the ones in the front lines. They're the ones dealing with potentially sick people on a daily basis. And I should stop complaining, man. I really should. So I'm going to. I got all the time in the world to do this stuff. I think it's important to get tested, and yeah, I don't know. I just I got ahead of myself there. But yeah, the PE exam done. Never got to think about it again. It will give me a nice little raise at my job, and yeah, I don't know. It's just one of these things. Even when I wasn't doing this type of work, I've always thought that I should have actually done this thing just as an accomplishment in life. It's like one of those things that you want to be able to do at least once, and yeah, I'm just really happy. I feel fortunate. Somehow I pulled it off, So for this episode, got a couple questions. Many people have actually asked why no more Savage Gold coffee. And yeah, I mean, I miss doing it in a way. It just, back when we were doing a lot of touring around Grand Annihilation, that was kind of the indicator that it was going to be very, very difficult to keep up on this thing. So I just, I was putting a lot of time, a lot of effort, and there just wasn't the return that I needed. And eventually I just started looking at how as I was spending my time, how I was, what I needed to do to keep things moving forward, how much personal resources of time, energy, and funding it was going to require to keep Savage Gold Coffee going forward. And I owed money to people, man. I owed money. I was in a position where I owed some money to people that fronted me some product in good faith, and I was paying it down. Things got a little bit out of, I mean, it's not as bad as it sounds. I wasn't like the mob was after me and people were like, I was ducking guys like Tony Soprano or something like that. It was just, I like having a zero balance with everyone. I don't like carrying any kind of debt, when it comes to friends and people I respect. And so that was one sign that maybe Savage Gold Coffee was not something that I should pursue once I pay down this debt that I had. I think that I wanted to avoid being in a situation like that again. So I decided after much thought that at least for now, I'm going to have to shut it down. And maybe it'll come back. Maybe, maybe after things start progressing in other areas of my life, I'll be able to get some kind of investment from someone, a partner or something like that, to help me really launch this thing. And there was a lot of things I wanted to do. I mean, I remember there was, I was doing a lot of live sales. That was a lot of fun. Going to these events, selling coffee, that was great. Like the Vitus flea market was a lot of fun, and I moved a lot of bags of coffee, sold a lot of cups of coffee too, and met people, got the word out, and it was really fun. But in a big way, I really it needed to be a lot more successful than it was to be more than just a hobby, and that's kind of like what I was trying to do. I was just spread too thin with everything, and that one unfortunately had to go. And one of the things I lament is that the cold press of the cold brew coffee was never really out there. Like I was able to cold brew a bunch of stuff and sell it to some custom made batches for people locally, but I was never able to get it out there in a bottled, mass-produced, form for people. And I think that, the dark roast that we had to this day is still probably one of my favorite coffees I've ever had. And that, as a cold brew, was like pretty mighty. And a lot of people dug it, but it just, I needed somebody with deep pockets, man, to invest, and get this thing distributed. And just couldn't do it on my own. And it's unfortunate, but I mean, it was a good time, good run. A lot of people enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I was like a big fan of it as well. I mean, I was all I drank when I was rocking and rolling with that. But maybe like I said, maybe down the line we'll go back to this. But I've been drinking Black Rifle coffee. Some good friends recommended it, and my buddy Jim, a guy who booked Tombs down in Florida, he's a veteran. He recommended that I check it out, and he also added that I'd be supporting a veteran-owned company, and I went ahead and did it. And I think that was really cool, man. I mean, I know, man, these days, over the last 4 years, everything seems to be really controversial. I mean, I know a lot of guys that were in the military. There's a group of guys, a lot of the dudes I know personally, like my closer friends, have similar politics to me. They're kind of left-leaning, but a lot of dudes from the military, a lot of vets are kind of right-wing, which is, I guess, at the end of the day, before the Donald Trump reign of terror, you can disagree with someone and be like, all right, this guy's views are a little bit right-wing. I'm over here. But at the end of the day, I don't really give a fuck. You know what I mean? But now, if you have anything that might indicate that you're a Donald Trump supporter, suddenly you're this fascistic, evil doer. And unfortunately, a lot of these vet-owned companies became fodder for that sort of mentality, which I think that regardless of political leanings, the veterans are probably one of the most exploited groups of people in this country. I mean, the government certainly doesn't take care of them. They come back from war, and we're at perpetual war right now. So all these guys are war vets. Sometimes they're blown up and they're not intact. They have like heavy duty emotional issues that have to be dealt with. And by and large, the government has kind of turned their back on them, and a lot of, I think that there should be a move to hire more vets too. If there's this move for diversity in our country, cultural diversity, whatever, sexual orientation, I also believe that you should try to hire more vets because these guys laid it on the line. They were out there putting their life on the line for everyone. And regardless if you believe in the war or not, any of these wars, that's kind of not really the point. The point is that these guys made a sacrifice, and you can also look at them, even if you don't agree with the political reasoning behind going to war. They're part of like the fallout of this whole thing, so they should be taken care of. Anyway, I support Black Rifle Coffee. I don't know if I agree with all these guys politically, but I think it's a good thing that vets, everyone that works there is a vet. They're taking care of each other, and I support it. And their coffee is sick, and I'm all about it. I'm just going hard with it, man. There's like the Murdered Out Dark Roast. There's Just Black. Those are the two that I drink regularly. And they got some other special ones that I'm trying to try all of them, going through the whole batch and just checking it out. And yeah, so far so good, man. So that's that's the bottom line with Savage Gold, and that question's come up quite a bit, and I just wanted to address it, and we'll see what happens down the line. Like I said, Evan contacted me and shared the new single for his band Quell, and it's pretty damn good. And I urge you guys to go out there and check it out. Evan is originally from Northern Virginia, moved to California, ended up in Stockholm, Sweden. And based on the information that he sent me, I'm assuming that Quell is kind of a one-man project. And, it has that dark, icy black metal sound that I love and probably a lot of you guys love. And I think it's the single's pretty cool. Apparently there was a bit of a hiatus with the band, and now it's returning back to form. And I back it. You guys should check it out. That's Quell, Quell. You can find them on Bandcamp and Facebook. And yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff. And yeah, they have a new EP called Turning the Sun to Stone, and I back it. Another question that has come up, and I'm sorry, I did not write the gentleman's name down. It could have come from a couple of different sources, and I am remiss on noting who actually sent this question in, and I've been under a lot of pressure, man, so you have to forgive me on this. It has to do with horror, and the kind of what types of horror I like. And this gentleman said that he prefers more reality-based, horror fiction that has to do with like serial killers and and stuff like that. So I'm assuming Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is probably something that's on this guy's radar. And I have to say that I personally am more of a fan of the supernatural elements in horror and cosmic horror. Though I do enjoy kind of the true crime, reality-based, stuff that's out there as well. I mean, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is like a totally fucking powerful movie, man. And scary, based on, Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole, two actual serial murderers. But I guess one of the things that I can use to describe my viewpoint on true crime and like horrific stuff and horror and all these things is use True Detective as kind of an example. The first season, okay? I'm sure many of you out there watched that when it was running live week by week, and there was a point where you weren't sure that at the end of this show, at the end of this season, if there was going to be a monster. At least I wasn't. I mean, and that's what kept me going. There was so much like arcane, esoteric stuff going on, and such incredibly horrible things were happening to people. And you were getting the feeling like you were questioning whether or not there was actually some kind of supernatural being that was involved in this thing, some demon or monster or whatever. And I guess that crossover, into reality is what I find really interesting, and why I enjoy the supernatural elements too. Because I've been reading a lot about demonic possession and exorcisms and things like that, and it's funny. I'm in this like really big Catholic Church Christianity kick right now, where I'm really interested in it, and the pagan roots of Christianity, the Jesuits, and they're the ones who have typically been involved in exorcisms and that kind of stuff. And demonic possession, demons, and hell. You can kind of see these things in a couple different ways. I mean, obviously, there's the narrative that demons are actual entities that exist. They're physical beings that reside somewhere in another dimension, in some realm, or wherever. Hell is an actual place. The devil is actually Lucifer is a fallen angel, like that kind of stuff. That's one way of looking at it. But then that's a literal sense, a literal way of seeing these things. In orthodox, there's an orthodoxy to that, train of thought, or the symbolism of those things. I mean, demonic possession, letting demons into your life, could be drug addiction, could be the chaos that ensues from having bad relationships. And then the darkness that follows all those things could be demonic possession as well. So I have a very broad idea of how all this stuff works. And, even my explorations into magic, with a K, magic, meditating on something with intention, visualization, like all that stuff, that's technically what magic is, not like pulling a rabbit out of a hat, and using symbols and rituals to focus your mind on certain things. And we would be surprised how often positive things happen when you do that. Now, I'm not saying that you're necessarily conjuring forces from beyond to do these things. You're focusing your own will, and that is what's actually manifesting. But the ritual, you have all these different talismans that you might use. You might invoke certain colors, certain, scents, symbols, incantations. That might only be focusing your will, or, and I'm also open to the fact that you actually may be focusing some kind of energy that exists outside of yourself to help you achieve these things. So I'm very open to this stuff. You know what I mean? And, whatever. People have all their different ideas. I'm not as much of a materialist as I once was, like years ago. I was more of a cash and carry kind of guy, like back in the old days. But I don't know. Things have happened to me over the years. I've experienced certain things that have broadened my mind a little bit. So anyway, back to horror. So yeah, I enjoy all kinds of stuff, man. I will watch pretty much anything, even if it's a really bad movie. If it has like some kind of horrific element to it, I'll try it out. I'll give it more time than I would, say, a drama, just because there's an element of horror in it. And I definitely gravitate to the supernatural stuff. You know what I mean? And but yeah, I thought True Detective, I thought that first season was, it turned out to be a crime film, but there's all this like really esoteric stuff in there, which really kept my interest going. So yeah, that was I like it all, the serial killer stuff, and also think about a serial killer, to do those horrible things. There's a certain MO that these guys have, like there are certain upbringings and things like that. That combination of factors could also be the doorway of letting a demonic element into their subconscious, which causes them to do all this murder and evil things. I think that the ideas behind all this stuff isn't as literal sometimes as people play it up to be. You know, it's like this religious orthodoxy. I don't think that it really was meant to be that way. Like when you read certain religious texts, you know, and the gods and goddesses and spirits and all this stuff are like metaphors for other things. And that's what I find really interesting, you know, and that there's these commonalities between different religions and all this stuff. And it's like, man, I can go on and on about this kind of stuff. And I feel like I misspent my college years by studying heat transfer and thermodynamics and stuff like that. And I probably should have went into this kind of thing, you know, the roots of religion, you know, history, you know, Mesopotamia, like the Samaria, studying Rome and Greece and Egypt and that kind of stuff. That would have been way, way more interesting to me. And I think I could have contributed a lot more to society had I actually pursued all that stuff. Now, for those of you out there who are following this podcast and also have been listening to the Gimme Metal Matters show, I oftentimes will reference two bands. There's a band called La Gratona and a band called Slaughter Shack. And both very obscure, unless you grew up in New England, you know, and maybe New York, you know. La Gratona featured Dana Ambrose, who went on to be in Keel Hall, Taz Niles, who was in the Boston hardcore band Eye for an Eye, and he also was the original drummer in Anodyne, which is a band that I played in before I was in Tombs. You know, it started back in 1997, actually. And Andy Donheiser, who has dropped off, you know, I don't know what happened to him. He's around somewhere. He was also in a band called Michael Mancini that Taz played in for a while. And he was in some thrash band before La Gratona. And he was this incredible bassist and guitarist. And I just kind of wish he'd done more things with his talent, you know. And Colin Burns, one of the best frontmen I've ever experienced live. I think he was one of the most charismatic, intense frontmen I've ever seen, honestly. And Colin was in La Gratona. He was like the focal point of the band. And prior to that, he was in Slaughter Shack, which they're almost this, like, they have, like, in my mind at least, they have this legendary status because there's not a lot of material available by them. I mean, they have a lot of recordings. To my knowledge, the only actual release they have is a split with this band called Built Spear, which turned into Stompbox, who eventually got signed to Sony Records during the 90s feeding frenzy of post-Helmet, like, independent music. And, yeah, I don't know how old a lot of you guys are, but back in the 90s, you know, Nirvana opened the door to alternative music, aka, you know, punk rock, you know, metal, whatever. I mean, death metal never really I mean, Nirvana like kind of opened the door to the underground. Death metal definitely stayed deep in the underground, like black metal. Like none of that stuff became mainstream as a result of Nirvana didn't help any of those bands out, let's say. But stuff that had like a commercial vibe, I mean, you know, Helmet, I don't really see them in the beginning. I didn't see them as being very commercial, but yeah, you could see the appeal of Helmet. There's like a groove. Those guys were more artsy and more in line with like this kind of Glenn Branca like noise thing, and then all the Biohazard type dudes latched on to their grooves, and they became very popular with like hardcore types, you know, and you could even blame Helmet for nu metal, which is like that's kind of the thing. Like a lot of people are like, yeah, such a great band, but they inspired such a I mean, I'm not a fan of any of those bands, so I'm going to use my opinion and say like one of the worst expressions of metal in in the history of metal, in my opinion. So anyway, so Slaughter Shack was around in the 80s. I saw them play a handful of times. They were a very popular band. And in Boston, there was a thing called a WBCN Rock and Roll Rumble, which, BCN was a major rock radio station in New England, and they sponsored this thing every year. It's basically a battle of the bands, and it would be, I forgot exactly how you qualified, but it was like a couple nights, several nights, different bands played on a bill. There'd be judges, they picked bands, and then a band won, and they got all these props and perks and everything, studio time, like all that kind of stuff. Well, if memory serves me correctly, Slaughter Shack won one year. It was like probably 1989 or something like that, or 1988, somewhere in there, that range, maybe 1990. I don't know. It was a while ago. So there's also a thing called the curse of the WBCN Rock and Roll Rumble, where people who generally won that was the high point of their career, and nothing really happened for them later. So I don't know. They kind of disbanded shortly after the Rock and Roll Rumble, and it was around the time that I graduated from college, and I was leaving town and all this stuff. And then a few years later, I moved back to Boston, and I was out at one of the infamous Tuesday night Bill's Bar rock nights, where every Tuesday night there'd be like a sick lineup of local bands playing. It was definitely a cool thing, man. It was like a fun, I was a young guy. I was in my early 20s, man. So it was like, that was the thing to do, man. You go down, stay out late, get up, go to work, tired. It's Tuesday. And I saw this band, Suicide King. It wasn't even La Gratona. Suicide King was like the early version of La Gratona. And I'm like, wow, this is like pretty cool. It's like, and that guy looks so familiar. And then I heard his vocals, and it was Colin from Slaughter Shack, except that he looked totally different. Slaughter Shack had this kind of, Danzig, like heavy metal kind of thing. Colin had like long hair. He had like a very, bikerish, like Axl Rose kind of thing. He was like one of the early dudes with tattoos, sleeves. Not a lot of people had that back then. I just remember him being this kind of shirtless, like long-haired guy with tattoos and this brutal fucking voice, and the band was this like, mid-tempo metal, like Danzig, Celtic Frost kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, this is awesome. Kind of like a little bit of a doom kind of thing. Not really doom, but, they were slower. At the time, you got to remember in the 80s, thrash and speed metal, that was like the thing. So anything that wasn't thrash had like, to me, was slow at that time. So anyway, this guy shows up on stage, Suicide King, two guitar players, bass players, like doing some crazy bass lines, singer, short hair, Rollins looking, shorts, and just intense. And it kind of reminded me of like the Rollins band. And I was like, yeah, this is like exactly what I like. And turns out it's the same guy. Okay. Suicide King, for whatever reason, turns into La Gratona. And then I watched them. I think I tried to see them every single time they played locally. And, back then people weren't handing out record deals. So they were able to they had like a bunch of 7 inches and splits and demo tapes and things like that out. And, they finally made a LP. And then the band broke up, and I was only a few years. They burned brightly for a very short period of time. I was introduced to Taz, and we started Anodyne, and that's a whole other story. But years later, the entire La Gratona catalog was re-released by Tortuga Records, which Mark Thompson from Hydra Head fame, it was his personal record label. and I wrote some liner notes for it, and it's a great collection of music that was just maybe a few years ahead of the curve. I think that if Lagratona had come out maybe 3 or 4 years later, when Dead Guy was a thing, and Bloodlet and all those bands on Victory, well, not Victory Records, but those bands are on Victory, and that was able to, attract enough people that liked hardcore music to check out something that was a little bit different. If Lagratona had been able to ride that wave, everyone would know who the fuck they were, because they were like a superior band to all those bands, in my opinion. And I love Dead Guy, but I like Lagratona better. They're just a little darker. I thought Colin's lyrics are always really cool, and they're better than any of the other band's lyrics. So anyway, I've been in touch with Colin, just sharing texts over the last few days, and I asked him if he had the Suicide King demo, and because I had it, I went looking for it. I've been living here for what, I don't know, 5, 6 months, 7 months, and I still haven't fully unpacked. I think that's a typical thing for people. I went through my cassettes, and I would have sworn that I had the Suicide King demo. I can see it. I know the songs, and I can visualize it, but it's not in my fucking collection now. I don't know what happened to it. It's gone. It's slipped away into the ether like so many other things. And there's a song called 21, which I just need to fucking hear it, man. So I hit up Colin. I was like, hey, by the way, do you have a digital version? And he said, no, I don't have, either he doesn't have it digitally or he doesn't even have the demo. And he's like, yeah, you might want to check with Taz about it. And because he's kind of the archivist of all this stuff, and he was working on some project to keep everything archived before all these like analog cassette tapes disintegrate. So I hit him up, and Colin before that he did send me a bunch of cool stuff, like an interview with Lagratona, like a practice tape with 21, and the interview was cool. It was actually, it's that kind of stuff really fucking hits me hard sometimes. Like when it's practice tapes too, like where you can hear people talking in the background, and then, you it's like a weird portal into the past, and the same thing with these like random interviews where it's like, the shit, it was like, it's like a weird echo of something that happened so long ago. And it takes you right back to that moment, and I get really, really, it's a real heavy feeling sometimes. So that was cool. And then Taz got back to me, and he's like, you know what? I don't know. I don't know if I have it. So, but he says, but in the meanwhile, check this out. And he sent me, part of this project he was doing to try to archive a bunch of stuff, and it was like all this live recordings of different bands. There's like Wrecking Crew, there's like Lagratona, there's a bunch of hardcore stuff like Bold, live at TT the Bears, which I think that club doesn't exist anymore either. Stuff from the Rat, which doesn't exist, but the Rat was like a super important venue in Boston, for independent music. And, you can read all about the Rat. Maybe someone will make a documentary about it someday, And one of the things that Taz included on there was the Anodyne WJUL live set, which I don't even know if I have that. And what's important about that is that most people that might know about Anodyne, they probably are thinking about the lineup of the band, the 3-piece lineup that had me and Josh and Joel, which, that was the lineup that did most of the stuff. Like we put out most of the, that was the lineup that was on the more well-known, out of a band that was relatively unknown, the more well-known records were made by us 3. we're the ones who went out and toured the hardest. We were out there. If you live in a different country or you live in a different coast than the East Coast, that's the version of the band that you saw. But the first lineup was a very, very good lineup. It was me on guitar. I really didn't do any singing, actually. El Nayor, who mostly these days was probably known for 27, a band that he does with his wife, Maria Christopher, and they're a fine band. He also played in a band called Spore, which back in the early 90s were like a legit band. They were on Tang Records. They toured a lot. They were pretty well known. And Spore was cool. They were like a very, very good band. He played guitar and did most of the vocals and did all this like other noise related stuff. He had a sampler, all this cool stuff. And Mike Davis, who was in Luca Brasi, Black Helicopter, like an insane bass player for a guy who, like, the stuff he played in that band surprised me because, like, I never really knew what his technical abilities were. And then I was like, oh, this dude can fucking throw down. So anyway, this morning I listened to this recording and I got like goosebumps listening to it not because it was so good, but because it just was, like I said, again, a portal into like another time. It was like a time travel machine where like it just takes you right back to that moment. And it's almost 20, let's see, 90. I don't know the date. It has to be over 20 years ago this recording was made. And WJUL Live at the Fallout Shelter is like, I don't even know if JUL does these things anymore, man. I should look that up, actually. But playing live on the Fallout Shelter was a thing. It was a very, very cool thing. And it was a Monday night show. It was in Lowell, Massachusetts, which, I don't know, it was like maybe 45 minutes north of Boston. And I played that Fallout Shelter thing with a couple different bands. And, I played with my band Otis back before. That was like my first real band. Anodyne played. I also played with 454 Big Block, and that was kind of destroyed the relationship I had with Scott Kahn because he was the kid who really ran the whole show there, and we were such dicks to him that it ruined my friendship with Scott. And Scott Kahn, if you're out there, I apologize. After all these years, I shouldn't have allowed those guys to be so brutal with you. And I feel bad. It's something that I've felt bad about for many decades at this point. But anyway, it was a fun time. I was, I'm a dude in like my late 20s, and all this kind of playing it live on the radio, having shit mic'd up and doing this stuff was like relatively new to me, and it was exciting. And people were interviewing you, asking you questions about stuff, and it was just very, very new and exciting for me. And it just the whole thing from start to end was just fun and interesting. You show up there. I remember Lowell. I don't know how it is these days, but back then it was kind of a rough town. So I just remember the memories of going to this Dunkin' Donuts on the way in Lowell. Once you got off the highway, we would hit this Dunkin' Donuts, and I just remember like this real hard ass like Puerto Rican chick was like working behind the counter with like, she had like some kind of gang like neck tattoo and like, but she was like kind of hot too. You know what I mean? But I was afraid of her. I was terrified of her. And I was like, yeah, large black coffee, please. And I was just like, couldn't process the whole thing. So attracted yet scared, You guys have probably all felt this at one time in your life. And then we would go to the studio. It was on the campus. And, like, it's funny being like 27, years old, and college people generally are, 18 to 21. And now those kids, they feel like little kids to me, that people in that age group. But even at 27, I was like, yeah, these fucking kids, man, But I'm only just a few years removed from that age group. It's like this weird paradox, So yeah, I felt like, really like kind of world weary, been through it, gnarly guys like walking through the college campus. And I'm just like, but in the reality, we're just like a bunch of kids, just a couple years older than them too, And yeah, you load in. I remember the load in was kind of a pain in the ass. You had to like lug stuff through like some kind of, hallway setup. I mean, it's not a venue, so it's like in the basement of some building. And yeah, you'd set up, you get like mic everything up. The sound guy, I can't remember his name, but he was a dude that actually I think became like a front of house guy somewhere, and went on the road, things like that. Yeah, you load in, do your sound check, get everything set up, and then there's like a couple hours to kill, and they order you pizza. Now, let's remember, we're in Massachusetts, so the pizza's not that good. But, hey, it's part of the whole experience. They're playing a bunch of music, a bunch of cool local bands. It's a college radio station. It's in that mindset, that vibe, you know what I mean? And it's time for you to play. And I'm like, shit, this is like being broadcast over the air. And you do your thing, and it's fucking cool. And it's over with. Go into the control room, introduce yourself. I hope I have those man, maybe I should archive this shit too, man. It'd be cool. Now that I live like a human being, it's like it should be a priority of mine to start sorting through all these things and making them, for posterity, in case I get like shot and killed by like a right-wing extremist or something like that. You know what I mean? It's at least sorted out where people can find this stuff, Yeah, so that's it's just fun. That stuff's fun. And I don't do fun stuff as much anymore these days. And yeah, the live on the radio stuff's always been a real blast, man. I mean, we've done a ton of them. I've done a ton of them just over the different bands. Like Anodyne's done it a bunch of times. Like, my brief stint in 454 Big Block, we did it a couple times. Like, Tombs has done it a bunch. One of the, that's some cool, we've done a lot of those things. One of the coolest things that in my life that I've ever done was be on the Pat Duncan show. Yeah, the WFMU guy, Pat Duncan. And he's kind of like the John Peel of New Jersey, if you ask me. Man, you look up his show, and he's had like Black Flag, The Misfits, Neurosis, Sam Hain. Like, it's insane. If all these great bands, and he invited Anodyne to perform on his show, and I was like so honored by that, man. And it was just the coolest fucking thing, man. And yeah, man, I probably have that Duncan set. See, there we go. I need to get a handle on these things. But yeah. So yeah, that's that's the story for today, man. Just playing live on the radio and just the past, and time flies on broken wings, man. How time flies, So yeah, I hope everyone's doing well. I'm going to try to get back into doing these things regularly. I got some plans for 2021 with this show. And now that I have free time and I'm out of the PE exam prison, I can start putting stuff together. And yeah, if you like this show, it's pretty casual. I don't know how many people are out there listening, but if you want to hear a little bit more professional thing, check out Metal Matters. It's on everywhere, everything. Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, all those channels. Talk with a bunch of people. The coolest thing that happened was talking with Steph Flam from Godin and Winter. Great interview. Interesting guy. Someone that I'm hoping in the future I can actually see him in person and have discussions, things like that. And yeah, there's a bunch of cool stuff going on. We're going on hiatus right now for the holidays, but the last episode's coming up on Tuesday, and that's the year finale of our top fives or whatever. And then we'll be back in January. And then if you like horror movies, there's Necromaniacs, which is a weekly show, and our year-end final 2020 is coming up on Thursday, and we're taking the rest of the month off like everyone else, and that'll be back in January. So that's it, man. And I'll catch you guys soon. And everyone be safe. Take care.
Well, this is what I never told you. Yes, we are animals too. Be alive to get it back, or now to get it off, but I couldn't wait. Eternity is here, no I couldn't wait. Eternity is here. Well, I never promised you anything, or promised me everything she said. I still solid and true, while you fell to pieces, but I couldn't wait. Eternity is here, I couldn't wait. Eternity is here, it's a long way down. Out of sight. You've known I've always wanted you, and since today is the end of the world.